Hello, beautiful people. My name is Althea Walters. Thank you so much for coming back to my podcast. Today, my guest is Suzanne Culberg, and she is a NOPE coach, NOPE coach, right? So that sounds good already. And today we're going to be talking about how to release 171 pounds. And Suzanne is going to talk us through that. We're looking at goals. We're looking at how to take small steps to get to our big goals. And so I'm so grateful that Suzanne has joined us today. And of course, I'm going to be talking about the NOPE part. Somehow, Suzanne, we have to talk about it. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. Suzanne, just go in. Just tell us a little bit about your backstory. What about this health journey, this part of the pounds that you had and then moving to releasing them? Just introduce yourself and then go into the story.
I will do, Althea. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honoured to be here. As you said, my name's Suzanne Culberg, the NOPE coach from Sydney, Australia. So probably joining many of you from the future. And I have had until the last 5 years or so, a lifelong struggle with my weight. My parents put me on my first diet at age 4 to fit the flower girl dress for my sister's wedding. That's a whole story in and of itself. And so I yo-yo dieted from 4 through to 30 years old. So decades of losing and gaining weight. Big numbers, like 43 kilos in 2006. That's just under 100 pounds. And then 60 kilos in 2011-12. So that's, I don't know, 120. We measure in kilos here in Australia. And I got to a point where I was like, not tooting my own horn, but I'm otherwise a rather smart person. How come I can't nut this weight thing out?
Yeah, I totally get it, Suzanne.
And it was kind of like my Achilles heel. So it was, most other areas of my life are going particularly smoothly. Like I have challenges, as we all do, but weight was like the last frontier that I could never quite grasp. And I couldn't diet again. Like I'm sure many listeners can relate. You start on Monday, you've cleaned out the cupboard, you've got the fridge full of veggies. You're like, this is going to be my week. And then by Thursday or Friday, the veggies are wilting and you're grabbing cheap and cheerful because it's just so much easier. And it's like, why can't I get my stuff together? So I was like, I'm done. I'd rather be fat forever than force myself to do this again. It's mentally draining. It's physically exhausting. And I didn't want to paint that picture for my children because in 2013, I had my first child. And I'd known from my own journey that we learn as children by modeling, not what our parents tell us to do. Because our parents say, eat this, don't eat that, go exercise, play outside, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I ditched diets. And for the first year or so, it was a struggle because I was finally free, like really free. Not free as in I'm going to start again on Monday or the 1st of January or whatever, but like truly free. And from that point of freedom, eventually the things lost their excitement. The chocolate, the McDonald's, the ice cream, because when you're allowed to have it and there's not a guilty pleasure or something you have to hide or sneak, it's kind of like, actually, I feel kind of lousy. My gut hurts. I'm tired. I have no energy. And so it's a gradual step-by-step process, which is why I was attracted to your podcast.
Lovely.
And from there, over the ensuing 3 years, I released 171 pounds, which is 78 kilos. But it wasn't fast and it wasn't quick. And it was, a journey into what am I really hungry for? Because if you're not hungry for food, actual physically hungry, then food's never going to solve it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, Suzanne. So over 3 years, you lost 171 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
No, that is a big deal, right?
Yeah, it's a whole person.
It's a whole person, right? And you were able to do that. That is not easy, right? Because I'm trying to right now lose 10, right? So we're going to have to talk about this. And you spoke about mental freedom because you probably didn't say it that way, but I coined it that way, having the freedom to, just be. and that mental capacity that you freed up by going through your process would have made a big impact on your life. I love that. But doing 171 pounds is a big deal. And it would have taken small steps, as we're talking about goals, to get to that part in your life where you're achieving this. So Suzanne, we have so many things to dive into. And then you said, what are you hungry for? No, that got me like, but we soon come back to this one. What are you hungry for? But I want to backtrack. Did you have a target for your goal that you wanted to reduce?
I did, and
weight?
I actually didn't reach it, Althea. I had an extra 5 kilos, which is probably around 12 pounds.
Okay.
But I got to a point where I was like, this weight is sustainable without me having to push or force or deprive or go hard. Like I believe so many of us, we have this idealized version in our mind. Once this, then that. And it was funny because one of my friends at the time, her partner is a bodybuilder, and they had a segment for people who had dropped a lot of weight. So because of the excess skin and stuff, and they were like, you could compete. You're so close to your goal. I was very, very fit at the moment. I'm not so fit, but would you like to do this? And I was like, no. And they were, hence Nope Coach, but they were like really surprised. I was like, but you could. And I was like, but why force myself to do something that I know I'm not going to maintain? To look back on the photos, how you look back at photos and go, man, if only I was skinny as when I thought I was fat.
Yes.
And it was like, I can maintain this now. I'm happy. I'm technically not in my healthy BMI, but that's a whole other conversation. But, if I can maintain this, easily and effortlessly, effortless, not effort none, people.
Totally understand.
Then why force this? And it was a real, reclamation for me that you not reaching your goal can be a good thing. Like you can redefine your goalposts in the other direction. Because so many of us, even if we do hit a goal, a weight goal, an income goal, some sort of goal, and we're like, oh, I'm not magically happy or more confident or whatever, I must have to, and we push the goalpost back another 5 kilos or more toned or whatever. And it was like, actually, no, I don't want that. And that was really refreshing for me.
So I totally appreciate you sharing this, because even when you said redefine the goalpost, a lot of us struggle because we keep it like this, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this, or we don't feel successful, we don't feel like we have achieved anything, and we don't feel fulfilled. But you made a conscious decision, right? To not stretch yourself to go beyond where you are, where you're comfortable, where you feel happy within yourself. You can maintain this, because probably if you had stretched to go to that goal number, then it may not have been the same level of achievement or fulfillment that you had. You probably would have sacrificed some more things, so something may have been thrown out of proportion. But redefining the goalpost is such an important part of the process when we are moving towards our goals, because energies may change, focus may change, or conditions or environment, all of these things may change. So it's also important that even when you're striving and going towards your goals, you are able to take a step back to reassess and then redefine the plan. And that's exactly what you did.
I love that, Althea. And I love even in your podcast here, before we hit record, you were saying, like, my audio is not the best, but like, I'm going to go with it. And I think that in itself is a lesson for all of us. So often we don't do the thing or take the next step because it's not perfect. Like, correct. I can't do this because I don't have the right visuals. I don't have the right audio. I don't have the right shoes. I don't have the right, I don't own an air fryer. Like, I recently got one of those. I finally caved. But it's like, we can make do with what we have and it will be enough. And our best gets to get better. So it's like, instead of going, I can't until, and like, even with weight as a goal, there are some things that you physically can't do at a bigger weight. And I will own that. And I have experienced that firsthand. I totally get it. But when I was in what I would label as a victim mindset. Like I wasn't a victim, but I had a victim
Yes.
mindset. Like, oh, I can't
Mhm.
do this because I'm really big. Yes, but there are
Mhm.
things that I can
You
do,
could have done.
and
So
I
it
do
is
those things until I can
right.
do the next thing.
Right. So it brings us to the point that, when persons are working on their personal goals, etc., it's do good with what you have now.
Yes.
Do good with what you have now. Sometimes we have some resources in front of us. We have people who could help us. We have something in our toolkit, either online or within our own environment, but we overlook it because we're looking for something huge, something bigger than what is in front of us, and that hampers us from moving forward. Right? So we
Yes.
have to remember to do good with what we have, the resources we have, you know, work from there and then work your way to the next level or the next goal. So I appreciate you sharing that with me, Suzanne. Um, that helps. So I also wanted to take a step back, right? What are two or three things that you struggled with while you actually was going through your process?
Yes. So I struggled a lot with other people's input. Like I acknowledged that they had the best of intentions and they were trying to help, but often people wouldn't really listen, and they would be like, oh, you should try this, or you should do that, or my friends had success with this. And it was kind
Mm-hmm,
of like I was building a long-term goal. I
mm-hmm,
wasn't doing a let's lose 10 kilos by Christmas or wedding or something, because for every time I'd done that quick fix kind of thing, I'd had an equal and opposite binge and regain. So for people with their input, as I said, even if it was of the best of intentions,
mm-hmm.
actually saying no, this is what I'm doing, and not wavering when the things weren't happening fast enough.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna come in here because you're saying you struggle with other people's input. And let me tell you, a lot of people struggle with that. And one of the reasons that I know we struggle is that when we go into our own goals, when we go into our own process, we don't have a plan. We don't know what we went in to get. We don't know what we're going in for. Our principles or our values were not redefined, like we're not really clear on what we're standing for. Or, yes, I'm going to go with this. If something comes in the way, that is fine, but I'm going to switch to that. But at the end of the day, I know what I'm bringing to the table and I know what I'm working at. But sometimes
Mm,
we don't know. And so when you go in and you don't really have a plan, anything can sway you. So somebody comes with
yes.
a suggestion, I'll take that. Somebody comes with something else, I'll take that. And everything that glitters, we jump on it, right? Not saying
Yes.
that some person's inputs are not valuable, but we should know what we're taking from different people at different times.
Yeah,
So,
discernment, Althea, the discernment
yes.
to run that through. And I think for me, because I did struggle a lot with boundaries, to say to
Mm-hmm.
people like, love and appreciate you, thank you so much,
Yeah,
and I'm doing this, like.
great, great.
So
And then sometimes we don't want them to feel bad, so that is why we just say, "I tried," or what. But you should stand in your own power of your choices and your decisions because that's what's important.
yes, 100%.
Yeah. You know what I want to touch on now? The saying no part that brought you to the whole nope coach, because I could hear you saying no, thank you very much. I love you, but I'm going to do what I'm doing. So tell me a little bit more about that nope coach.
So I've just recently rebranded to my website, everything. I'm super excited about it. I'm loving it. And I think for many of us who are overgivers, like we give so much to others,
Mm-hmm.
we so backtracking a bit, giving
Yeah.
and receiving are paired states. And what I mean by that is you can't have one without the other, like inhaling and exhaling. If you
Mm-hmm.
exhale enough, eventually you have to inhale or you pass out and then inhale. So you can't have one without the other. And so many of us, we do give to others. We are the yes person. We are considerate. We are caring. We're like, sure, I'll do that. But we cannot give without receiving. And our victim mindset, or part of us, can be like, I do so much for others and nobody ever does anything for me. Like, I am speaking from experience here. But the way we receive is via over consuming, whether that be overeating, over scrolling, over staying up late and watching Netflix, even overworking. Some forms of over consuming are more socially acceptable, overworking, even over exercising. But I had an injury, and anyway, so overgiving is matched with over consuming. And the reason that we overgive, from my point of view, is that we struggle to say no. And we don't want to be rude. We don't want to be uncaring or inconsiderate or whatever. But when we say no to others, it gives us space to say yes to ourselves, so that the things that we've planned, the veggies in the fridge, aren't wilting because we're running around after somebody else. We actually have time to do the meal prep or the bulk cooking or whatever it is, or the gym membership. Instead of skipping out on the exercise class or the pool or whatever, we're actually saying no and meaning it, so that we can look after ourselves. And that's a big part of my work now, helping people to set boundaries, because it sounds really easy, but I understand it's totally not, because especially those who are the closest to you, your family, your partner, your children, they are used to a version of you. And often what we do inadvertently, we get to a point where we're exasperated. So then we just blow our top, lose our biscuits or whatever, and then blow up and then feel guilty and then overconsume some more. So it's about, once again, baby steps, going from having no boundaries, being a people pleaser doormat, to setting boundaries is also a journey. It's not a quick thing.
Yeah, I love that. So the no coach. So I like the concept that you shared around over consuming. And we overconsume food sometimes, we overconsume social things, we overconsume the internet, we overconsume conversation, all of these things that we can overconsume. But I like the fact that you are now focusing on, how do I say yes to myself so that I can free up time for myself to do more of the things that I want to do.
Yes. Once again, the discernment we were talking about before, and consciously, because we can even overconsume personal growth, personal development, podcasts and stuff, because we're like
too much of something.
And that can get frustrating, because you're like, I know all this stuff. Why is my life not changing? I know all this. Like, it's almost the petulant teenager energy cross. It's like, yeah, I know that. But, to know and not to do is not to know. So my invitation for anybody listening with any podcast, book, whatever you consume, like I recently just watched Ted Lasso, that show. Oh my goodness. I have notes from the TV show, because what are you going to take from that and change or alter or put into practice in your own life, rather than, oh, that was nice, and next.
Yes. And that's the same for me, because I love reading books, different concepts, etc. And I bought a couple books that I had to read literally in August, right? But I made a decision that no more. We're going to part these books because I have work to do. There are things even from the previous things that I learned that I have not yet implemented. I've not yet tried to do anything. So that could have been over consuming for me, but I was able to make a decision to pause. So we have to be so conscious of the things that we invite into our space, that cause us to feel overwhelmed, that cause us to feel flustered, like we can't move or we feel stuck, but sometimes we are doing it to ourselves. So I like the work that you're doing. I like the work that you're doing, Suzanne. Suzanne, I just want to backtrack a little bit. So when you were going through your health journey and also improving to lose that weight, what if you had to think back, what are two tips, any amount, what you're comfortable sharing, that you could share with our audience to say, these are the things that you can help to keep you focused throughout this time? What did you do?
So a big one, and it's kind of like, you can't hate yourself healthy. So I know for me personally, I'd heard the message before, like you've got to self-love and love yourself. And to me, it never landed, because I was like, if I loved myself, then I would lose all my drive to change. Like if I accepted this, then I would never make any changes. And I believe that that's some conditioning that I don't know where we picked up societally or whatever, that is totally not true. Because if you think of something, a person that you hate is a strong word, but a person that you dislike, you're not particularly going to be loving and caring towards them because you don't like them. And it's okay not to like people. There's all people around the world that, we like and dislike. But when we treat ourselves that way, like, you don't deserve this, you need to work harder, you should, like, and guilt and shame. But instead it's like loving yourself healthy, as in, like, I had a challenging day and I ate McDonald's. Not I'm a bad person because I ate McDonald's. There's a difference. Like, when we dissociate the behavior from ourselves as a person, and when we do it consciously, like, it was so funny, just before we got on this recording today, I've been having a challenging issue with my children, and I was like, man, I really just want ice cream. And we didn't have any, so that was disappointing. But I actually live really close to the shops and I had time. I was like, I can get the ice cream, I can eat it, I can come back. And if I'd done that, no shame or shade, it happens. But I was like, actually, then I'll be on a sugar high. And, so it's just that, it's that pause and slowing down and going, like, what am I hungry for? And I was like, I'm hungry for space. What do I have? I've got like 15 minutes. So I went and sat outside in the sun. It's actually a glorious day here. We've had a lot of rain, but the sun's out, and just breathed and looked at the things that I appreciated. Because I struggle with the term gratitude. Like, another thing people have often told me is a gratitude practice. And for me, as soon as I hear the word gratitude, I can flash back to being a small child. You should be grateful. There's starving children overseas. And there's a lot of shame associated with that. But another thing that I have, so the second tip, is an appreciation practice. So basically, it's the same thing, just change the word. If a word is triggering, if a word has charge for you, how can you massage it and get the lesson? So, like, I appreciate the space to have to, record podcasts. I appreciate the nice weather. I appreciate clean drinking water, because some people don't have that. Appreciation is, because you kind of get, I believe, on a trajectory. Like, how something happens, you stub your toe and then you get a note and your bill's late and then your neighbor's yelling and you're on this, like, downward spiral. When you appreciate, oh, I have clean drinking water. Oh, it's a nice day. Oh, I have this time without my kids. Like, it makes me sound like I don't love my kids, but I'm a hardcore introvert. I also love being alone. You go on the opposite. It's like the upward spiral. So, because, like, once we start on that downward spiral, oh, you've had one, I've blown it now, I might as well eat a whole packet. Oh, I'm going to add ice cream. Oh, we end up on this, trajectory of binge. Whereas pausing that and going, okay, I had a really bad day, I ate that thing, it wasn't great, but what can I do now in this moment? Not, because the thing is, once you stop dieting, once you stop telling yourself, I'll start again tomorrow, you only ever have now. And that's enough to pause you in that moment. And it doesn't happen every time, but it gets easier and less often the more you actually consciously aware of the behavior you're in.
Yes, those are some lovely points that you shared about, loving yourself healthy and appreciating what you have now. And I like the fact that you brought us back to what are you hungry for, right? What are you hungry for? And you shared that you're hungry for many things, for space, for one of them, to do the things that you want to do. And when we came on the podcast, I told you that I was rushing from a meeting, coming straight here. Even before I came onto the podcast, an hour before, I was saying, oh my God, do I beg Suzanne for a reschedule? I'm not too sure this meeting is going to end on time, and I don't want to be flustered going into the podcast. But then I was hungry for the space to do this. I really wanted to do it. I really wanted to carry out our commitment of doing this podcast episode. So that's what I was hungry for in the moment. So you coined it for me. I was hungry for space to really get my podcast, going and getting the episodes done, because I enjoy this. I enjoy the conversations. I enjoy learning from, each other in terms of what we do. So when we have defined what we are hungry for, this is the message I'm getting from you. When we have defined what we're hungry for, it gives us the drive to go and do the things that we want to do.
Yes. And it's a matter of not shaming ourselves for it. So, for
Yes.
example, when I was younger in my family, there was a lot of shame about eating and food, and but it was also used as a reward.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in Sydney now, and my
Okay.
family live in Tasmania, which is a significantly colder climate than here.
Okay.
And not that long ago, Dad asked me, my father rang, he's like, "How are you going today?" I'm like, "I'm cold." Like, it seems like physically cold. He's like, "What's the temperature?" I'm like, "I don't know." Like, because I don't, he has a thing on the wall and whatever. And I'm like, he goes, "Well, how can you be cold if you don't know what the temperature is?" I'm like, "Well, it feels cold to me." And he was being really insistent. And I was like, "Well, hang on, I'll get the app and I'll have a look." And I can't remember what it was I said to him. He goes, "Oh, well, you're allowed to be cold then." I was like, "Excuse me?" And I think sometimes when we check in, what are we hungry for? Like today, I've very recently had my children be away for a bit, so which I enjoyed. I also enjoyed them being back. But I could be guilting and shaming myself, like, "Oh, you've just had a break," or "You're a mum, you should," and some people can't have kids, and all this sort of stuff, which is a voice in our head. Or you can be
Yes.
like, "Actually, I am in this moment hungry for a break. It doesn't mean I don't love my children. It doesn't mean
Correct.
I'm a bad mum. It doesn't mean anything." Like, when we put the connotations on, because like sometimes for food, I am physically hungry. "Oh, well, you just ate an hour ago," but I'm actually hungry. Because for me, I'd be like, I'd feel guilty about being hungry, and I wouldn't allow myself, because it's not lunchtime yet. You can't eat lunch. Like, it's back to my dad. You can't be cold. The temperature says it's this. It's like, but my body feels cold, or my
Cold,
body
right.
feels hunger. So what I would do is I wouldn't allow myself to eat because it's not lunchtime yet. But then I'd go and eat chocolate, or like I'd eat some crap because that doesn't count. It's not a meal. And then I wouldn't be hungry at the mealtime because I filled up on junk. So all of this to say, when we check in with what we're hungry for, the biggest part of it is not to guilt and shame ourselves, because, well, you shouldn't be hungry, you ate an hour ago. You shouldn't be cold, the temperature's this. You shouldn't, you shouldn't be rushing. You should be more organized. Like, whatever voice comes in, it's like, well, actually, thank you. Noted. But this is how I feel.
Exactly. Exactly. I appreciate that. And not guilting and shaming ourselves. We get caught up in that so much.
Yes.
The inner voice, and then that stops us from doing the things we want to do, or just living freely. You spoke about the freedom that you get from, the things that you have been doing. So that guilt, robs us of the freedom, just the
Yes.
space to be and to live in the now. You also said we only have now. So some of the times we're not making the decisions that we're supposed to be making towards our goals. We're not moving, but we only have now. So we can't keep on putting off the things that we plan for ourselves and we plan for our lives. So, oh my God, Suzanne, I appreciated all of this conversation. Um, we spoke about so much. Even, making do with what we have, taking the small steps towards our goal, redefining the goalpost if we are struggling too much, learning to say no, and building our boundaries so that we can say yes to ourselves and make the decisions for ourselves to move forward. And making sure that we're loving ourselves healthily, we're loving who we are, and our bodies, etc., and then of course working towards that. So, but my favorite that I'm have to reflect on is what are you hungry for? I'll have to keep reflecting on that. What are you hungry for? So it was so great, Suzanne, to have you on this podcast. So I know, we're on the Focused and Fulfilled podcast. I talk to people who are working on their goals, working towards their goals, staying focused, and remaining true to themselves, and having the fulfillment that they plan for their lives. Suzanne, I can see that you're fulfilled. You're happy with what you're doing. You're so focused on what you're doing that it has turned into so many different parts of your journey. So
Yes.
I'm so grateful for you for sharing. Suzanne, how do we find you?
Oh, thank you for asking. So my website's the best place. It's suzanneculberg.com, and I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes because
Yes, I
Culberg
will.
is a very interesting spelling. No one's ever got it right the first time.
Yes.
And if you go to my website, there's a few things there you can grab for free. First two chapters of my book. I did write a book about my weight journey, and that won't sign you up for my list because I'm very thing about marketing transparency, and I
Great.
can't stand
That's
getting
fine.
tons of things. So you'll get the
Yes.
first two chapters of my book, or if you want to hear from me, I send a weekly newsletter that's also there. I literally just sent one this morning called Life Lessons from SpongeBob SquarePants. So
I'm sure that's such an attractive way of getting people's attention.
oh well, the one coming out next week is Life Lessons from Harry Potter. So I do love myself a good book or a good TV show. And I think, there's so many lessons in things that we listen and we take it for entertainment. But if we actually take something from it that we change, then,
Yes.
it helps us towards our goals.
Yes. Awesome. Awesome. I'll definitely put your information in the show notes so my audience can find you. So Suzanne, again, it was so awesome. Thank you so much for being on the Focus and Fulfilled podcast. I know my audience benefited from your sharing, and I can't wait to release this to them so that we can all, bask back into this conversation. And thank you so much again. Good evening, good night, good morning, wherever you're listening from. It was great. And this is Althea Walters again, your host for the Focus and Fulfilled podcast. Thank you very much.